Good afternoon, everyone. Please welcome to the podium Isha Mehta.
Hi, everybody. My name is Isha Mehta. I'm studying business analytics and sustainability here at Kogan, and it's my honor to welcome you all and also introduce our two wonderful moderators. Alexis Hokerl is doing her master's of science in sustainability management and is also a double eagle, having achieved her undergraduate degree here as well in environmental science and sustainability. Robert McClamey is studying business administration, nonprofit management, and marketing, and he's also experienced 2 marketing roles in companies in their startup phase, and is incredibly excited to hear what our panelists have to say. With that, I'm excited to turn you all over to our moderators.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here. Before we get started, I want to recognize a couple of special guests in our audience. Thank you so much to Dean Dave Marchick and Marnie Abramson, who are joining us today.
Welcome.
All right, now let's get our panel introduced. I'd love to start off with Danielle Vogel over here on the end.
Surprise!
Danielle Vogel joined Kogod's Management Department faculty in 2022. Her classes focus primarily on the intersection of entrepreneurship and sustainability. She's also the Assistant Director of the Valoric Center for Entrepreneurship, which we are sitting in today. Prior to joining our faculty, she founded and operated a climate change-motivated grocery store called Glenn's Garden Market in DuPont Circle. Glenn's was beloved locally and recognized nationally as a leader in sustainability and innovation. She sold the business in 2021, which means she's no longer in it on a daily basis, but she remains with some great stories to share in our sustainability management class. Before founding Glenn's, Danielle worked to pass comprehensive climate legislation as staff to both Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate. She also served as a trial attorney within the Environmental Enforcement section of the Department of Justice. She earned her Bachelor of Arts from Tufts University and her JD from the Washington College of Law right here at American University.
Next up, right here to my right, I want to introduce Jill Tyler. Jill is an alumna of AU, and she is the co-owner and service director of Rye Bunny, the hottest new restaurant in DC that just opened a couple of weeks ago, where she is helping to shape a more sustainable, people-centered approach to hospitality. She is known for creating dining experiences that feel elevated yet approachable, while building incredibly loyal communities around her restaurants. Prior to Rye Bunny, Jill led the service program at Tail Up Goat, which earned and defended a Michelin star and was a James Beard semifinalist. Additionally, Jill was honored with the Michelin Outstanding Service Award in 2024. Jill's work really sits at the intersection between resiliency, care, and sustainability, and I'm thrilled to have her with us today.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, I am excited to introduce Daniela Senor. A graduate of the Culinary Institute of America and a certified sommelier, she's worked in some of the top kitchens across the country. In 2016, she launched Colada Shop, a cafe that brings the vibrant flavors and culture of Cuba right here to the district. She later co-founded Michelin-starred Bresca and award-winning Elegancia, both rooted in Latin flavors and storytelling. Daniela is known for championing team leadership, especially for women and minorities. Her leadership has earned recognition from Forbes' Next 100, the Washington Business Journal's 40 Under 40, and she recently joined American University Science Institute as a fellow, exploring the multifaceted relationship between immigrant women, food, and policy. And with our introductions complete, I'll turn it over to Alexis to get our discussion started.
Thank you so much, Robert. So we are so excited to have all 3 of you with us today to talk about your businesses, your entrepreneurial journey, and the theme of the panel, which is resiliency. So to kick it off, we're going to talk about what is resilience. Resilience is a topic that means something different to everyone. So to get us started, Danielle, can you tell us your definition of what resiliency means to you? And specifically, can you talk about a specific challenge that you faced and that you overcame, how it affected your business approach?
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is a surprise for everyone. I am standing in for James Warner, who will be with us today, but I will tell you some stories and it's going to be great. So I define resilience as picking up the weight of failure over and over and over again, right? It's the ability to navigate adversity, not always necessarily with poise and grace, but with a dedication to getting to the other side of it. All of you have experienced adversity probably today certainly over your time at American University. And your character isn't defined by the way you're handling yourself when you're on the ground. It's defined by the way in which you get back up and learn from the mistake. So at the Valoric Center, we talk about the entrepreneurial cycle as you've got to hypothesize, you test, you fail, and then you learn from it. And then you start the whole thing over and over and over again. And whether or not you're planning to start your own businesses, I know that you've gone through that cycle. And so resilience is really taking the moment of self-awareness to recognize what you've learned from the journey and how you can use it to improve yourselves as you take those next steps, whether it's into the job market, furthering your studies, or just into the world generally. So again, resilience is just the ability to keep lifting that weight of failure over and over again. Don't fear the rep. Right? Just get as many of those lightweight reps in as you can. And at the end of it, you end up building a muscle that is resilience.
That's an excellent answer. Daniela or Jill, would you like to add to what resilience means to you or add a different perspective?
Yeah, I would say difficult to follow that one, but it was I would say great definition. But I would like to add, I would say an example that I heard early in my career where it was like, you get very excited with those that fresh strawberries that just came out, and you're so excited to work with them, and you have them in a new dish, and everyone in the team, you get them excited. And I think it's really, not really focusing only in that beginning, but when you have to do the same thing over and over and over, how do you keep falling in love with it? How do you keep improving upon it when you're actually doing the same thing, but finding new lessons within, let's call it the same chapter, right? So I would say that's resilience to me, right? It's like, because it's not always going to be exciting. It's not always that fresh new thing. Like, yes, we love openings. That's the truth. We love openings. That's the funnest part of what we do, like imagining and putting, a whole concept together and seeing it come to life. But then the running of it, right? It's like, it can become very monotonous in a way, right? And it's like, but you have to find new ways to not only improve and be better and challenge yourself, challenge your teams by doing the same thing. So it's, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I think those things are both right. I think for me, I also, and I think it kind of is what you were saying, like the conviction to do the thing over and over again, but also the flexibility to know that you might have to change how you think you are going to get there to like keep the idea of what you ultimately want it to be to get there. You have to be kind of flexible along the way, and maybe change how you thought that path was going to get you there, but making sure you have, that business plan, that conviction, that idea of what you are going to attain, and keep that at the forefront of all those decisions, because you'll have to change a lot of things to get there.
Can I build on that? Can I amplify that?
Yeah.
Because I think the role is for women is to build each other up, and I want to give that some props. Hope is not a strategy, number one, right? And there are going to be a lot of times where things don't turn out the way you anticipated that they would. And resilience is the art of reconciling reality through your vision for the way you want things to go, and making sure that even if it didn't follow exactly the steps you anticipated, you end up moving the mission in the right direction, right? So for instance, when I opened the doors to my store in 2014, we were fully and only and rigorously and constitutionally locally sourced. That was on Earth Day of 2014, right? So we get it, Earth Day's tomorrow. The next day I was stocking orange juice. That, you don't get that around here, right? That's not a local product. But what I realized was, listening to my customers, what I had created did not align with their vision of what a grocery store was, and I had two choices. I could go down with the ship, right, and shutter the business quickly, or I could be resilient, relinquish pride of authorship, and provide them what they needed in order to participate in my vision. So it certainly was a modification, but it was done in a very situationally aware way that allowed my vision to flourish, because now we could actually serve people, because we were building something, we were building a place that they wanted to participate in. So yeah, I think like the idea of having to do it over and over and over again, and the idea of it not always going the way you planned, all feeds into this notion of resilience being you do it anyway, but you are the decision maker in chief. Right, so even if it didn't turn out the way you planned, you still have to filter it through your vision for where you're trying to get with the idea.
And then what you're saying is what I always say, like when people ask, why do so many restaurants fail, is because of not doing that. I think, we tend to be a little stubborn and be very focused on our vision and unwilling to change our vision. But I think that adaptability and understand you're not your own customer. And yes, we spend a lot of time in that vision, but we also have to be able, it's a two-way street. We have to listen and we have to adapt constantly, especially in this environment. And I think being able to do that and being realistic is like, okay, I envisioned it this way. This is not going to work. I need to change a couple things. And that doesn't mean failure. That doesn't mean you didn't plan something amazing. That actually means you're a smart business person.
Evolving.
And you have to evolve.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'd like to say, Jill, huge congratulations on the opening of Rye Bunny.
Yeah.
As we've been speaking about, resilience oftentimes means redefining your idea of success. During your transition from Tail Up Goat to Rye Bunny, was there a moment when your definition of success had to change? And if so, how did that shift influence all of the decisions you made going forward?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was kind of scary about blowing everything up is for the past 10 years we ran what most people would consider like a really successful business, right? We had a lot of critical acclaim. We had built an incredible community, both of people we were lucky enough to work with, and then folks who had been coming and joining us for 10 years. And so to know that you have all of that going really well and to make the decision to kind of blow it all up, because what looked really successful from the outside wasn't successful as a business, was kind of a really scary thing to do. But I was recently talking to someone who said, unless you're willing to blow it all up and start again, you're not trying. And so I was like, okay, all right, we can do this. And so I think for us, what we knew was, in starting something again, success had to be measured by how sustainable the business would be long term. And so that's where John and I kind of started building our idea for what came next and with Rye Bunny. And for us, there were certain things we weren't willing to compromise on. So our accountants at Tail Up Goat were like, hey, you can claw back some profit here, right? You can figure out how to not be essentially running a nonprofit, which is what we did for the last 4 years. We can do that by stop paying for health insurance, get under 50 employees so you don't have to provide it and even pay for half. And I was like, that's not what we're gonna do, and things, stop paying PTO, stop doing things like that. And so for us, number one was building a business that wasn't gonna compromise on the values as business owners that we wanted to be. So for us, that meant every part-time person on our team has health insurance the first of the month after they start. And we cover 100% of the employer-sponsored plan. All of our employees, thank you, full-time or hourly, get PTO. And that starts accruing with their first paycheck. A lot of these things are benefits that exist in more traditional 9-to-5 jobs. And one of the reasons in my early 20s, I'd sometimes feel uncomfortable running into people I had graduated with, and they're telling me what they're doing on the Hill, and I'd get oh, you're still in restaurants, And for me, it was really important to show that this is a career, whether you're owning it or working in it, right? And so it's important for us that we offered these benefits. So that was kind of first and foremost what we were thinking about. And okay, if this is what we want to do, and that's really expensive, right? Offering healthcare and covering 100% of it, that's about a $130,000 investment for our team of 35 people a year. How do we do that? So then we have to start thinking about, okay, and building the business from that point. One of the other things we did is we looked to creating more sustainable wages for our team. So we're running with a smaller team, but everyone on the team is paid the full minimum wage, which in DC right now is $17.95, going up in July again. But that means we can split tips between all employees who help make the experience happen. So that means our cooks are part of the tip pool, our dishwashers are part of the tip pool, instead of it just being front of house. My husband John and I, when we first met, we were both working in restaurants, and I was working in the front of house. I worked half the hours he did. My paycheck was double his. And so for us, one of the things we wanted to work at and look at make more sustainable was the wage disparity between front of house and back of house that exists. So all of these kinds of things, when we were talking about what comes next and what does that look like and what does success look like, for us it was really rooted in the kind of business owners we wanted to be and thinking about, okay, how do we build a business that lets us do that? Because if your business isn't successful, it kind of is what you said earlier, it doesn't matter what lofty goals you have or how you want to do it. If you haven't figured out how to make it sustainable, then you can't take care of your team. Then yes, you're going to serve orange juice, because that's the thing that's going to allow you to do everything else. Yeah.
I just wanted to pivot really fast because I had a follow-up question to that. But as you've been talking about the changes that you've been navigating, transitioning from Tail Up Goat to Rye Bunny, you've had to rework the whole restaurant service model to address some financial sustainability while maintaining the values that you hold. Can you walk us through what drove that shift and what gave you the confidence that your new format would actually work? And how did those experiences teach you about making decisions under uncertainty?
When we were thinking about what was next, we went through a lot of thoughts. We're like, maybe we leave DC. Maybe John should be a private chef in San Francisco. Maybe we should do something like that. But we really loved restaurants. We really liked being our own bosses after 10 years. I would have a hard time, I think, going to work for someone else. That's the truth. People joke you are your own boss so that you can pick when you work the 100 hours a week. And I think that's true, but there is something to be said for it. And so I was talking with my friend Arjav, who runs an incredible restaurant in Austin called Birdie's. And he told me, you're going to open a counter service restaurant. I said, no, I'm not. I love hospitality. And I'd only seen counter service as something more fast casual in my brain, which is great. It's just not what draws me to restaurants. I've been working in restaurants since I was 15. And for me, the reason I keep finding joy in it every day is you're creating a space that people connect with. You're creating a space that people want to come celebrate big and little life moments. They're going to come in on a first date, and then they're going to come in 5 years and tell you it's their 5th wedding anniversary, and then a year later bring you their kid to meet. And that's kind of how special is that, And I was afraid with counter service, I wouldn't be able to have those moments. And my friend Arjav was like, yes, you can. Come hang out with me for a few days. So I went to Austin, and I said, I'm not doing this, but I'm going to come hang out with you. I miss you. And an hour in, he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to open a counter service restaurant. And so a lot of the idea of why it was scary, I was able to see in action because he and Tracy had kind of already written this playbook for me. And you don't get anywhere without mentorship and people showing you a different way of doing things. And Arjav and Tracy opened every facet of what they were doing to us. Our managers went in January and were there before we opened, and they're just incredibly kind, giving people. And I don't think we would have ended up at this chapter without their help, and they're pushing this and they're showing us their financials and just being really open. And so they gave us a soft landing.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to ask, I know all of your business models are, while they're in the food system area, they're pretty different, but they're all rooted right here in DC. So I'd love to ask Daniela and then open it up for the panel, how has being a business that started and grew in DC affected the way you operate?
Well, I think there's both sides to it. I think it has allowed me to have amazing opportunities that, I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else in the country. Being in a round table with Vice President Harris and be working on policies that actually impact and change the entire country. Those things are incredible. But I will say, the other flip side of that, not actually being a state and having to work in the current structure of how DC and the DC Council work, and policies in place have also made it very challenging. Currently DC has the highest minimum wage in the entire country, with the exception of some cities that in Washington State, actually, but not as a state, right? And the fact that, politically we're able to be introducing new things on every year that allows not to plan, right? And be able to confidently say, as a business owner, I want to invest more in this city because this is how my business plan should be. I am constantly having to change my budgets mid-year because of policies and things that change mid-year. That's not sustainable for small businesses, right? We need to have the ability to plan in both ways, and I understand, and I'm not afraid of change, right? I think things need to keep evolving. We're in a rapidly evolving world, but the cadence of how things are implemented are a little wild, and I do think it makes it one of the most challenging environments to run a small business, especially within food. I just came back actually couple hours ago from the Restaurant Leadership Conference in Phoenix, and had the privilege to be talking to a lot of restaurateurs across the whole country, and comparing notes, and I would say war wounds at the same time. But I did really realize, like, we are in a very challenging environment for things that shouldn't be, right? I think DC also has one of the most beautiful food scenes in the entire country, on the opposite side of that, right? I think it's a city that celebrates diversity when it comes to food, and I think that's incredible. Because, when you look at top restaurants in top cities in the U.S., most of them fall in that European realm, and we are in a very unique situation here where people actually appreciate, are willing to pay diverse foods, diverse culture, and really, to me, makes it such a special place. And I really wish that we can all work together to make it sustainable, to keep it that way.
Awesome. I'd love to open to Jill or Danielle if you wanted to add anything to the DC specific restaurant.
You want to take that risk?
I think everything you said was right, and I think, it's really hard how quickly things can be implemented in DC. I think how things can go on the DC ballot makes change very rapid, because DC becomes a testing ground for a lot of ballot measures that special interest groups would like to see all around the country. And because DC is very, very easy to get things on the ballot, that is why some of this change happens so rapidly. And I think often many of these things look very good on paper, but until they're implemented kind of thoughtfully and with the rest of the support needed on a more holistic level, it's hard to respond. And then also, we're this tiny little place between Virginia and Maryland with very other different realities happening. So you're, as a small business owner, trying to navigate what's going on in DC and also compete with Virginia and Maryland, who have very different realities. And so it can be a challenge.
My friends are so thoughtful. Dramatic. Absolutely. I'm going to not get myself in trouble because I don't own a business anymore, so I'm going to say the thing. DC is a company town, and Congress is our company, right? So when business is bad for Congress, business is bad for the small business in DC. And it's not just Congress, it's the federal government generally. So in 2017, we had a surprising election result. And I was operating a grocery store in DuPont, and the entire theme of the election was insiders versus outsiders. We're a town of insiders, and we lost that election, right? And so what happened was nobody left their house for a month. And then they finally did, and they'd walk into my store, and it was like, I bet it was like you guys see at MGC, right, in the dining hall. The hair was crazy. They're wearing their pajamas, right? Like, nobody knew what to make of this new world order, but they definitely weren't going to do it here. So we saw a massive exodus from DuPont and many of the other neighborhoods in 2017. The same thing happened in 2025, right? So it's not just that we're a testing ground and a petri dish for Congress to float theories of social change, but we're also completely cyclical based on who is or is not working for the federal government. And so those are two really important operating conditions that are very specific to running a business here in DC. So can you guys read between the lines of what we all said? These were some hard hits up here, but we're putting it nicely. Yeah.
So a little bit talking about navigating having a location in DC. Danielle, especially as Colada Shop has expanded multiple locations across the district, and you've had to balance between growth and then maintaining a strong brand identity. Can you walk us through a specific decision that you had to make to choose between whether adapting due to either cost, operations, or customer demands, and then staying true to your original division, and especially in context of navigating funding challenges?
I would say, since 2020, I would say the word pivot is just a daily thing in this town, right? We, especially, I think 2025, made, I think, COVID seem like child's play in our industry, right? It was by far the most, challenging year, I would say, in our almost 10 years of business, for sure. And I think it's a constant evolution. It's a constant evolution of, what Danielle said earlier. It's like you have to adapt. What is happening now that wasn't happening even 3 months ago? And I think the cadence of that change is what, again, makes it hard, because there's no planning. There's no planning when from one day to the next you have massive layoffs. There's no planning when all of a sudden we have major ICE raids for the National Guard, and from a moment to the next, and the whole tourism industry was, pretty much went to zero, right? So you have to just learn to take the hits and adapt. And doing nothing is not an option, right? Because doing nothing means you just cease to exist. So I would say, that we have to be constantly on our feet and finding ways to creatively still stay true to who we are and not compromise on our values and quality, and establish very well what are my non-negotiables, very much to what you were speaking earlier. But how do we navigate this new world? That is a very, very, very different business plan than when we started Colada, even though from an external standpoint it might look somewhat the same, right? But the margins are very different. The city is very different, right? The pace of change, with AI and other things, everything's rapidly evolving. But also, most importantly to me, is guest perception of value is changing drastically. And I think that's something that's not spoken about enough, right? I think COVID gave a unique opportunity to people to have time. So a lot of people learned how to cook. They didn't know how to cook, right? They started spending time in their homes and actually making their homes cozy and a place that they actually wanted to invite their friends to, when previously they would just go out all the time. Because the supply chain also had to evolve, they also started giving direct to consumers better quality products. So now that consumer has access to better quality products that they can also implement at home. And technology like, nice fancy Breville's where you can get pretty much, very, very high quality lattes at home, So what are we doing in this business? Going back to you, it's delivering experiences, because I think that the product in itself, yes, of course, we're going to aim and do it better than you can do at home. That's what we're always trying to do. But I don't think that's where the value truly comes to the consumer anymore, right? The value really comes from the experience and the connections and making it a happy place. So it's I think that has been our focus in the last years. Like, how do we make it back to a happy place, right? That's what we want to be, while making our products better every day, and finding creative ways to be a sustainable business, and finding, pretty much grabbing that P&L and stripping it away. It's like, where are we spending money that we don't want to or don't need to, or more yet, where our guests are not seeing that value? Because sometimes we make decisions that we think are valuable, right? And it's like, oh, I'm spending money here because we think, our guest sees it, and they don't even, that's not something that they value. But then you're not giving them something that they do. So it was like through focus groups and really, again, dismantling it from an internal standpoint, dismantling the business completely. I would say 9 years in, and redefining that value and putting it back into that experience and the quality of things, and doing it when, back to your question, when it's very challenging to get funding. As we've grown, I think we had initial challenge in the beginning, I would say, of accessing those funds. But then actually it's become even harder as we've actually then outgrown smaller funds that are there to help small businesses. And now I'm like in this in-between world where I'm like too large to be small but too small to be big. And it's just like, how do you navigate? And, and our intention is to continue to grow. At this point, because of what was said earlier, probably not in this market any further, right? Like this is our home, but we are looking to grow outside of the market. However, it's still a very real thing that less than 3% of funding goes to women. And then you add a minority woman to that, and that's 0.2. 0.2% of funding goes to minority women. Yet 80% of businesses currently in the U.S. are being started by women. So you do the math. It's very challenging to find ways and funding to creatively grow. And why do I want to keep growing? I think it all starts to me like, what is the message that I want to share? I always had the intention. I want Colada to be a space that changes the dynamic of how people view Latin culture. I want it on purpose to be a place where people want to take photos, a happy place where the music, where they relax, where the colors are vibrant, because our culture is very vibrant and it's a very positive and happy place. And I felt coming in that it wasn't being portrayed that way. And and in that process, we build beautiful teams that also need an opportunity that other businesses unfortunately haven't been giving them because of also their background and where they come from. So to me, that is, I not only want to show people what our culture is about, but I also want to keep building opportunities for our team. But the funding is a key piece to that. So it still requires, I would say, a lot of light to be shined into it, because it is very much a huge problem.
I also want to open up to the rest of the panel, especially because we do now have 3 female entrepreneurs on the panel. If any of you also similarly experienced any difficulty with either funding or how you overcame some form of resiliency as a female entrepreneur and business owner.
I think my funding probably looks pretty different from yours because I don't have 7, shops. I think one of the things we learned from Tail Up Goat to Rye Bunny is we didn't give up any equity in Rye Bunny this time. To have given up, all of the profits we pay someone back, which in restaurants takes a while, and then for them to have a piece for forever. I understand why we structured our first deal that way. We had never opened our doors before. We were not proven. But the second time around, it was really important to me that we didn't give up equity. So instead, we did all our fundraising as a 5-year note with people who decided to partner with us. And there were definitely people who were interested, and then they found out they weren't actually going to own a piece, and they're like, no way, I'm out. And I was like, well, this is actually better terms. When you're getting paid back in some ways, So I think that was interesting, but that was like one of those convictions that I was like, no, we're not going to change this time. And I don't know that we could do it again if we decide to try to expand Rye Bunny. We would probably have to look at things differently. But we hadn't had a lot of luck navigating the SBA previously. And so it's what we decided to do this time. And because we were in a second generation space, we got to raise a lot less money. So we needed $750,000 to open Rye Bunny, which compared to other restaurants that I've opened was far less. Tail Up Goat in this economy probably would have been over $2 million. At the time it was 1.3. And Revelers Hour, which I was an original founder of but have stepped away from, that was a $1.8 million project in 2019. So it's something that costs a lot to open. And again, as profit margins have shrunk, you really have to think about how you're building out spaces and what that looks like, because that's really changed.
Yeah, one of the concepts we've spoken a lot, not just on this panel, but in our sustainability management class, is the pivot.
Food systems.
Food systems management class. I know the title. Is the pivot. And I think before I came into that class, my idea of a pivot was just shifting slightly, but I think in some cases it can mean a much more drastic shift. So Danielle, I'd love to ask, you opened your store in 2014, and then another store in 2016, which you then closed in 2018, and then you sold the first in 2021. I would love to know, can you offer some more advice about how, and maybe more importantly, when, to choose to pivot and how drastically to do so?
Yes. Deciding whether I want to answer the question you asked or another question entirely.
Answer the other one.
All right, that's a great question. it really goes back to what Jill was talking about earlier with regard to financial sustainability. So we opened the first store, front page of the Washington Post, 300 people overnight camping out to come into the store, huge numbers, beloved day 1, day 2, day 3. Year 2, it started to come up into sustainability again, and that's when we opened the second store, because I fell victim to the question I was asked every single day by strangers who had no idea what they were asking of me, and the question was, but what's next? But what's next? But what's next? Because apparently the only definition of success in capitalism is growth. And I wasn't seasoned enough to realize that that was wrong. Right? And so I ended up opening up a second store as my response to the question of what's next. We built the store in 2016, anticipating a Clinton administration. We built the store in Shaw, right near some brand new, beautiful condo buildings. Didn't happen the way we expected it to. Those condo buildings never filled up. You cannot make a living selling groceries to people that don't exist, right? So if people weren't walking through the doors, we couldn't service our commitments to our team. We couldn't service our commitments to our lenders. Certainly, we couldn't pay rent, etc. And so the math simply didn't work. Now, under traditional circumstances, that would be perceived as a massive failure, right? I'm a 4th-generation grocer. I'm just genetically coded to know how to do this stuff. But somehow I couldn't make it work. And so we realized that it is the job of the leader to prune the dying branch so the tree doesn't perish. And it led to some really tough conversations with folks because we were closing a location, and with that, we were needing to potentially shutter an entire team. And I really fundamentally dispute the metaphor of business as family. It is not that. That's a deeply flawed metaphor.
Yes.
But these were people with whom I spent 100 hours a week, right? People with whom I had invested deeply in this thing we were trying to bring into the world. And so saying goodbye was going to be tough no matter what the economic circumstances were. And so we made the hard call to shutter the second location to focus all of our attention on the mothership. And what we ended up doing was we went to every member of the team and said, do you want to do this instead? And some of them said, I've enjoyed my experience in retail. Good day, ma'am. Right? And they went to grad school and they wrote their graduate school admissions essays about the values of Glens Garden Market. Right? They brought our legacy into the world in that way. Some of them decided to come back. And so what we ended up with was a consolidated team of mission warriors, really values dedicated superstars that were able to take DuPont to the next level in a big way. And so it could have just been a story of failure. But instead, it was a moment of consolidation, rooted in math, right? You can't fight the balance sheet. But the result of it is that we really came out much, much more fortified and cohesive. But I'll tell you that the day I closed that lock for the last time, right, stuck the key in the door and closed the line, that's a sound you don't forget as a business owner. When you've got 100 years of family legacy on your shoulders and you're handing the keys back over to the landlord, that's a sound you don't forget. So I walked straight down Connecticut Avenue, and I put this R on my wrist. And what do you think that R stands for?
Resilience.
Resilience, baby. Right? Because you just got to keep picking up that weight until you build the muscle to keep going.
I did not know about the origin of your tattoo, so it's perfect that you ended up stepping up on this panel.
Yeah, it's a reference to a secret Glens Garden Market value. It includes some profanity, but we'll leave it at resilience.
Now, before we open it up to the floor for questions, I just wanted one last opportunity to ask you guys, especially because this is the Changemakers in Sustainability. I know we have a lot of students who are interested in sustainability in the audience. I wanted each of you to briefly explain how have you prioritized making a sustainable and positive impact on the communities that you serve, or on just the environment and the sustainability within your business. If you could explain a specific instance on how sustainability itself has impacted your business decisions.
And we can think about sustainability more broadly,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
social certainly.
Yes. One of the things that was important for John and I as we rebuilt this business and this new business was prior to 2020, we had been in a position at Tail Up Goat where we could donate cold hard cash to causes we believed in, and had donated $100,000 to organizations in DC. Post 2020, there was never a penny again, so we were not able to do that. And I think it's wonderful to be involved in people's events, and that's something that is often asked of restaurants. Can you come do 500 bites at this charity gala, or can you do this? But often I think you don't know exactly what impact that's making, and so something we wanted to do was really focus our efforts and pick organizations that we were going to really partner with this time around. And I knew as a walk-in only restaurant, if we did our job well, I would have something people wanted, and that would be a way to skip the line. So we have 2 reservations a night that there's a $25 booking fee associated with. So it's money, but it's nominal when you're going out to eat if there's 4 of you. And then we donate 100% of those booking fees every night. So by the end of the year, we should be making probably about a $9,000 donation to each of these organizations. So we've partnered with Dreaming Out Loud, which works in Wards 7 and 8 in food insecurity. And then also Amica Center for Immigrant Rights, which works with folks facing deportation in the DMV. And so for us, it was figuring out, again, when we're talking about a values business, where we wanted to signal who we were, what we believe in, what we are going to stand for as business owners, and also causes that, align with the team we were building. And so that was something that, we figured out how to do sustainable giving as a small business with that.
For us, I think in different ways. I think in a very, I would say, traditional, sustainable, when you think of restaurants, like one thing that we focus a lot is in our packaging. We spend a lot of money on sustainable packaging because it's important to me that we protect the world. And a lot of our food is to go. And sometimes that is actually one of the things that people do not see the value in, right? And have no idea how much it costs either for a business. Like for me, that's 3.5% of my P&L. 3.5% of my P&L goes into a sustainable package. It's a big chunk of money. And it's always something that when we bring in new people into the team, they look at that number and they're like, whoa, that's a lot of money going into packaging. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also one of the things that is important to me because we are putting a lot of ultimately trash out there, right? It's a lot of food to go, so there's a lot of bags, and yes, they make me very happy when I see that colada bag going around or that cup, but I want to make sure that we are not just adding to the problem. And even though I am aware it's one of those things that I'm not saying no one values, obviously a lot of people value it, but probably not at that 3.5% mark. So it is a sustainable commitment for us, but also in a completely different way. In an effort to also make this industry more sustainable, especially for mothers, our scheduling practices and flexibility of we don't actually have traditional schedules in every store where people come in at this time and leave at this time, because especially within hospitality, I sat in those shoes before where I was looking, I'm like, I love what I'm doing, I love this work. How am I ever going to have a child? Because, there's no child care past, 6 p.m. pretty much. There's no daycare that you take your kids to, or it's very challenging to find nannies that stay till 1 a.m. when most of the restaurant industry goes home. So, for me, that was an important measure that we would be able to accommodate because we're open all day. So we're able to work with our team members that have special, I would say, hours that need to go pick up their children from school or bring them back. And sometimes they actually leave and come back. So they clock out and then clock back in. So that, putting those practices in place and having that flexibility, and we really leave it to each individual store and be able to adapt to that, but encourage it so we are able to provide within our industry a place where working mothers can work ultimately, and that's an important thing for us. So I think, like you said, sustainability can be in so many ways and within what we're doing. So. Those are 2 things that I would say we spend a lot of time in accommodating and making sure that we are sustaining.
How many employees do you have?
175.
Okay. So between the 2 of these women, they're supporting more than 200 families, right? So I don't want to tell a story about myself and sustainability. I'd rather tell a story about them. because they are doing this. Like they're playing the game of keeping a small business in business on the level extra hard. They told you a little bit about the details of how difficult it is to operate in DC, but this is like, we're speaking into mics. If there were no mics, you would hear some real battle stories of what it's like to run a business here. They have done it with grit, with grace, but with a prevailing generosity that makes these two women not only legends in our industry, but like the most enduring role models for what we could all do if we were able to run our businesses the way we dreamed of, right? And there are so many operators that just say, oh, I can't afford that packaging. I'm not going to spend 3.5% of my balance sheet. Or, well, you know, you accountant, you're right. I think we will just cut healthcare to our employees. That's not as important as maximizing our profit potential. But at every single turn, they said, that's not the way I see the world. That's not the way I operate. That's not the world that I want to create for my team. It's not the example that I want to set for my community. Right? So I would just challenge us all to understand the unbelievable example that these two are setting in leading with, again, with grace, with generosity, with vision, as they hold up 200 families with their hands, and they make every decision the hard way, not the easy way. Right? So it's not about profit maximization. It's about treating our people the way we want them to be treated, about creating the world we want them to live in. That, frankly, if you're doing it this way, it's the best part of starting a small business. You get to create the world and the rules you wished existed everywhere. And even when the rules change every 10 minutes, and even when the minimum wage goes up and the tipped minimum ballot measure is good and then it's bad and then it's good and then it's bad, they've continued to preserve this adherence to a worldview that is elevated. So I just want to say, as a tail up and now Rye Bunny enthusiast and a Colada Shop enthusiast, thank you for running your businesses this way. We are all better for it.
I think we still have a little bit of time, so we'd love to turn it over to our audience for a Q&A session. Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask our panel? Let's start right up here.
Hello. My name is Liana. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications here at Kogod, and I'm just fascinated and enthralled by your perceptions of running a business in this city. I looked at the Allbirds IPO flop and I said, okay, well that was a business that had really staked its name on sustainability as its core tenet. And I'm curious to what extent you feel like you have brand affinity from your commitment to sustainability versus to what degree you consider it a risk factor, or a moral crutch, or whatever you might want to call it, because you're running businesses under difficult, adverse conditions on purpose. And I want to come to Rye Bunny because I know you're supporting my local community, and I want to come to Colada Shop because I know that you're letting people, pick up their kids. So how does that play into the local promotion of your business in any way? As a local who'd love to support you.
Tell the truth, we don't promote it. We don't. We just do it. And I, in the hopes, to me, that our teams just tell that message for us, right? And so I'm not saying, again, it's not an important thing, but I'm not, and I've debated this a lot, right? Because there is a PR factor there, or a story potentially there. But again, running a business is very hard, and you have to make all the time, difficult decisions. So I really hope that I'm never in the position that I have to cut those sustainable factors out of that decision making, but I honestly cannot tell you what decisions I'm going to have to make. And the one decision that I will not make or try not to make as hard as I can, is to fail, right? Because the only way I can do any change is by keeping our doors open, right? So that is the truth, and I think especially as women, it's difficult to talk about money sometimes, and people want us to only do things for the goodness of our hearts, and oh my God, we're doing this to change the world. And yes, I am, but I'm also running a business, and if it's not a nonprofit, right, which I do want to do, but that's a different story. That's a different thing, right? So to run a business, the first thing that we have to do is keep the doors open and actually make money, right? And that's the only way I can make the decision and have the ability to make the decision that I'm going to spend 3.5% on my P&L on sustainable packaging. If I don't make money, I cannot do that, right? So So I guess for those reasons, maybe answer your question, I don't promote it, we just do it. Let, I would say, things speak for themselves. And, sometimes in things like this, I do say it, but it's not something where we are putting it on our walls and saying it out loud. And I think from a hiring practices standpoint, it basically becomes most of our recruiting in itself, right? Where I'm not spending money recruiting because people find out that we do this through the existing people that work there, and it just kind of works itself out that we have people come back, and we can have a lot of people come back after maternity leave, and they know it's a safe space in that regards, and that we're flexible. Because it's difficult, I'm not saying that in the future I will not expose it more, but I don't know, I think it's just kind of one of those things that we try to do our best every day. And sometimes we're forced to make hard decisions that don't make us happy. But every day we try to figure out how do we stay to our commitments and our not break our non-negotiables, but keep the doors open, And I've also had to close allocation recently, which again, it was such a difficult decision, right? It is heartbreaking, It doesn't matter, how many restaurants you open. It's just closing one. It's like giving away your child. It's awful, So I don't want to have to do that, right? So I think it's sometimes also making the right decisions to be able to continue to, I guess, focus on the bigger mission, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, co-sign all of that.
Retweet.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah, right here in the yellow.
This yellow. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Yep.
My name is Veronica Brooms, and I'm actually visiting from another part of the world. So I'm across the pond in the UK, and I work in sustainability. I can relate to much of what you said in terms of being a founder, dealing with entrepreneurship, but especially in terms of sustainability. And I'm impressed, kudos to all of you for what you've done as women entrepreneurs, as founders, as people who've run businesses who happen to be women. Because it's commendable that not only have you been able to have jobs, but it occurred to me that you began with the end in mind. So you wanted to run businesses that had environment integrated, social integrated, and you recognize it's not a nice to have. As a business, the economic is as important. And it's one of the reasons that I think ESG needs to have a second G, because it just assumes that that's a given. And in fact, it's not a given for many businesses. But there are two questions I want to ask. One relates to the packaging, and so this is from Danielle, because you spoke about a lot that you're spending on packaging. And I know from my experience in terms of the work I do, that there's a lot of innovation around packaging, where you're having edible packaging and not necessarily packaging that has to be reused, and it's moving from a linear to a circular. Maybe Jill, this applies to your business in terms of food. So I'd be interested in the innovation that may have come from the approach that you've taken in your respective businesses in the hospitality sector. And the other part of it has to do with energy and consumption, and whether there's anything you'd want to share with us in terms of key lessons or priorities that you've evolved over the years.
I feel like you're better at this one than me.
I think in packaging, always, I would say that the main thing still is the more sustainable still means the most expensive. Unfortunately, that's still kind of it's the same way where organic or the things that we want and we should be getting as givens in this world. What's I feel like what we deserve, right? To have clean foods and again, clean packaging. It's still a huge burden, for a lot of businesses. So that I think the innovation and the technology is there. I think, unfortunately, the other option is still so much more affordable to most businesses, right? So it's a hard decision for a lot of businesses to make, right? Because again, in a business where margins are razor thin and every day more so, Making that decision might become like, well, that I need that 3% to keep the rest of the thing alive. So, unfortunately, I'm gonna, move to, single-use plastics that don't, are not sustainable, and they're just gonna end up in the landfill. Or because we're talking about 1 cent to like 15 cents. It's not like on a single item, or in some cases, like we have, some bowls, pulp bowls at the Century that are like almost 70 cents. It's wild, like honestly. But when you're eating that bowl, you're not thinking about that. You're just, okay, what's inside of it? And it's like sometimes, you think that the $15 bowl that comes in styrofoam is the same as your $15 bowl here, but like not, the consumer might not fully like add the math there, right? So I am looking forward when those worlds kind of meet, where we can have sustainable packaging that's actually affordable. I think there's definitely been some strides in certain things, and things like straws have come a long way, from things that have traditionally been waste, like avocado pits or, agave pulp, and have become more affordable. But there's some things that is just like, we're talking like 20x of the alternative, right? So I think we have a long way to go there, and the value, so people don't feel like they have to make such a drastic choice. And sorry, remind me the second part of your question. Energy. For us, we try to make sure that basically we are using as much of the entire product as possible. So one of the things that we do, so like our core menu, that's completely based on cross-utilization to minimize waste entirely. But one of the main things we've done in the last couple of years is that our seasonal menus, we try to focus on a single product. And then that product is completely used throughout. So like our summer menu that's coming up is corn, right? So, we're using the corn husks, we were working with farmers ahead of time, then sourcing the corn, then we're using the husks, we're using like every single part. So we're making a corn syrup with the husk that's going into the cocktail, and then so it's just, nothing is really going to waste. We've actually even recently, the skins of plantains, that's been one thing from the beginning. Like our plantain chips, actually we keep the skins on them, and we've had most people peel them and take them off, and then that ends up, but they're completely edible and actually have most of the nutrients of the plantain. But then also have, in other cases where we use a plantain in other forms, take that and have used it like for events and doing like a vegan ropa vieja with actual plantain. So we're always trying to innovate and find ways where we're using the entirety of the product and limit our waste. And not only does that drive profitability, because we're creating profits out of things that traditionally are wasted, but it also, I think, again, creates a more sustainable cycle, and making sure that we are, fully utilizing it. We honestly don't even have a choice anymore. It's like, if you don't make those decisions, I think you just cannot stay in business anymore. And that's the truth, because it's you want us, everyone will say, okay, we're driving this by sustainability, yes, but it's also, we're driving it because we need to find margins somewhere. So it's a little bit of both, but I think that planning is important when it comes to sustainability. And yeah, I think that to me is like, and our team gets very excited about it. Like, how can we bake something out of nothing, basically? And when I was talking about like how we kind of dismantled everything last year to try to figure out how to pivot this business and find value, that was one of the main things where we were like, when I said we're spending money on things that we didn't need, like, why am I buying another syrup or doing something else for this cocktail when then this is going to waste? So anything that had like no cross-utilization was removed. Anything that had a lot of waste or didn't, really understanding our menus that didn't move enough or weren't like a top sellers, like people, this is not sustainable in our menu anymore, right? So I think you just have to have a lot of, open your eyes and again, not be afraid to dismantle what you built and kind of reinvent yourself simultaneously, because you kind of just get in the day-to-day of running your business, and the world has changed so much, and everything around us, but even the products that we buy, and the world that we're living in, the whole meat industry, beef industry is in crisis right now. And you have to figure out creative ways to, still be able to, again, service our community, service our guests, and stay true to who we are. But yeah, I don't know if that was a long-winded, I'm sorry, long-winded answer, but.
So resilience required.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I would like to just thank our panelists one more time for an amazingly engaging conversation.
Yes,
Alexis and Isha for doing a beautiful introduction. Thank you guys so much. And the Goals and Systems class for putting on today's event and preparing the speakers. You guys did a brilliant job. Thank you for all the work you put into today.
Definitely make sure to check out Rye Bunny and the Colada Shop. I think we still have some desserts over there. No food waste, so make sure you grab some on your way out. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.